The story the cameras never caught begins in the shadows of Atlanta's reality TV world, a place where alliances shift faster than the lights on a reunion stage. It started as a rumor whispered in back rooms, but now, the whispers have turned into a storm. Mona Scott, the powerhouse producer behind Love and Hip Hop, and K. Michelle, the unfiltered songstress known for shaking tables and speaking her mind, were spotted together in what fans are now calling the Secret Summit. The question that's tearing the fandom apart is simple. Why were they meeting without Rasheeda, Frosty woman, who helped build the empire? Mona once called her crown jewel. Witnesses claim the meeting wasn't just business. They say Mona and K. Michelle met in a private suite at a luxury midtown hotel. Guarded, secretive, and tense. One staff member even described the air as thick enough to slice. It was supposed to be off the radar. But someone snapped a blurred photo of K. Michelle storming out with her phone pressed to her ear, muttering something about Rasheeda's little act being over. Within hours, that photo hit the blogs, and fans went into meltdown. What could possibly be happening behind closed doors? Why would Mona, the very woman who once defended Rasheeda on camera, suddenly meet with her biggest rival? Insiders say this was no casual chat. It was a calculated move, a power play designed to shift control of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta into new hands. The same hands Rasheeda once accused Mona of favoring too much. Now, it seems the tables have turned. Reports claim Mona and K. Michelle were discussing a major narrative shift for the upcoming season 1 that could humiliate Rasheeda, expose secrets she thought were buried, and paint her in a light she's fought years to escape. And here's where the story twists even deeper. Hours after that alleged meeting, Rasheeda posted a cryptic message on Instagram. Loyalty means nothing when money's on the line. No names, no hashtags, just pure tension. Fans instantly connected the dots, flooding her comments with fire emojis, snake emojis, and one repeated question. Is this about Mona? It's not the first time reality TV's queenmaker has been accused of betrayal, but this time feels different. This time, the betrayal seems personal. For years, Rasheeda stood by Mona through the chaos, the fights, and the scandals. She defended the brand, defended the cast, even defended K. Michelle when the show nearly tore them apart. But if this secret meeting is what insiders claim it is, a plotted takedown masked as a creative discussion, then we might be witnessing the biggest backstage betrayal in Love and Hip Hop history. What was said behind those closed doors? Who leaked the photo? And most importantly, how far will Mona Scott and K. Michelle go to take back control from Rasheeda Frost, the woman who refuses to bow? Stay tuned, because the truth behind this secret meeting might just destroy friendships, families, and the entire future of the franchise. Under the dim hum of Atlanta's skyline, the air that night felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. Mona Scott sat in the back of a sleek black SUV, her phone glowing against her face as she reread the text from K. Michelle. It's done. She has no idea. Her pulse quickened. Years of producing reality television had taught her that betrayal wasn't just good TV, it was survival. But this time, it wasn't a storyline. It was real. Rasheeda Frost had been drifting from her, questioning decisions, talking to the press without approval, and worst of all, aligning herself with people Mona didn't trust. Mona's empire, built on control and loyalty, couldn't afford cracks. And now, with K. Michelle back in her orbit, she was ready to tighten the reins again. Inside the hotel suite, the meeting had ended hours ago, but its echoes still burned in Mona's mind. She could still hear K. Michelle's voice, sharp, fast, almost trembling with satisfaction. You gave her too much credit. Rasheeda ain't loyal. She only loyal when it benefits her brand. Mona had stayed quiet then, just watching her, weighing every word. K. Michelle had been unpredictable in the past, but tonight she sounded focused, deliberate, dangerous. You really think she's your friend? She pressed on. She's out there calling you manipulative, saying you're using her marriage drama for ratings. You really gonna let her play you on your own show? Mona hadn't answered. She didn't need to. The seed was already planted. She'd been hearing the whispers for months, crew members talking about how Rasheeda wanted creative control, how she felt Mona was out of touch, how she'd been filming extra scenes without approval. At first, Mona dismissed it as gossip, but when a certain production assistant sent her a voice note of Rasheeda venting during a shoot, complaining that Mona don't care about the real story, just the mess, that was the breaking point. Meanwhile, Rasheeda had no clue. That same night, she was at her boutique, talking to Kirk about expanding the brand, unaware that a storm was already circling her name. I just feel like I've been holding this show down for years, she told him, leaning against the counter. Everybody else gets a storyline, but when it's me, it's drama. I'm tired of being the face of pain. Kirk nodded, half listening, checking his phone. He didn't know that on social media, the first wave of rumors was already spreading anonymous tweets about a secret meeting between Mona and K. Michelle. Someone even tagged Rasheeda under a photo of the hotel lobby with the caption, "Loyalty is dead in Atlanta." The next morning, the internet was on fire. Bloggers dissected every frame of that blurry picture. Fans swore they could see Mona's handbag in the corner of the shot. Others claimed it was fake, but the narrative had already formed. Mona and K. plotting something big. Inside Mona's office, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. "Ignore it," she told her assistant coldly. "Let them talk. Rumors keep the lights on." But deep down, she knew this wasn't just noise. This was exposure, something she'd always avoided. By noon, Rasheeda had seen the post. She froze, staring at her screen, her jaw tightening. "What is this?" she whispered, scrolling through the comments. Fans were tagging her nonstop. "Girl, they using you. Watch your back. Mona and K. laughing at you right now." She felt a pit in her stomach. She wanted to call Mona right then, demand answers, but a part of her hesitated. She'd been in this business long enough to know that calling too fast could make you look weak. Instead, she opened her notes app and started typing a.com. Indirect message, something that would look innocent but sting just enough. A few minutes later, it was live. Funny how people act like they built you, when they really just benefited from you. Within seconds, the post exploded. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, and one familiar name lurking in the likes list: K. Michelle. When Mona saw it, she didn't flinch. She just leaned back, smiled faintly, and said, "Perfect." Because now, the tension wasn't hidden, it was out in the open, where she could control it. Conflict meant engagement. Engagement meant power. And if Rasheeda wanted to challenge her, she'd have to do it in front of millions. Later that night, Mona met K. Michelle again, this time not in secret. They sat in a quiet restaurant, far from the cameras. "She took the bait," K said with a laugh, sipping her drink. "That post. Pure guilt. She knows what she's done." Mona looked at her, calm and measured. "You sure about this? Once it starts, we can't walk it back." K nodded. "Oh, I'm sure. You think she didn't talk about me behind my back. She's been playing nice for the cameras, but she's been messy off screen. I'm just giving her what she gave me." The two women locked eyes, a silent agreement forming between them. Whatever friendship, whatever trust had once existed, it was gone. This was about control now. And as Mona Scott lifted her glass, the faint glint of satisfaction crossed her face. She had built an empire on stories like this, but this one was different. This time, the lines between producer and player were blurring. She wasn't just orchestrating drama anymore, she was living it. By the next morning, Atlanta's entertainment blogs had exploded with headlines. Betrayal brewing between Mona and Rasheeda. K. Michelle spotted laughing off secret meeting claims. Rasheeda woke up to a dozen missed calls, including one from a producer she thought was on her side. "Listen," the voice said when she picked up. "They're saying the footage from last season's reunion might get They're painting you as the one causing division." Her heart dropped. "What do you mean she demanded. "I already approved that cut." "Well," the voice sighed, "apparently there's a new direction. Mona's making changes." For the first time in years, Rasheeda felt powerless. All the loyalty, all the image building, it meant nothing if Mona decided to twist the narrative. She knew how ruthless editing could be. One snip, one rearranged sentence, and she could go from fan favorite to villain overnight. She called Kirk again, her voice tight. "They're setting me up," she said. "They're trying to make me look like the problem." Kirk tried to calm her down, but she could hear the worry in his tone. "Don't jump to conclusions yet, just wait it out." But she couldn't. Waiting meant silence, and silence. She couldn't. Waiting meant silence, and silence. Was suicide in the world of reality TV? As evening fell, Mona's office was buzzing. The editing team was working late, rearranging footage, slicing together clips that told a different story. One where Rasheeda appeared confrontational, distant, even cold. Mona watched from behind the glass, arms crossed. "Make sure the music hits when she rolls her eyes," she said. "Viewers remember moments like that." A young editor looked nervous. "Won't she notice?" Mona gave a small laugh. "She'll notice, but by then it'll be too late." And so the game began. Fans thought they were watching drama unfold naturally, but behind every tear, every scream, every shade thrown on camera, Mona Scott was pulling the strings. Yet even she couldn't predict how far this one would spiral. Because in trying to destroy Rasheeda's image, she was about to unleash something even she couldn't control. Hours turned into days, and by midweek, the situation had spiraled beyond anyone's control. Rasheeda couldn't walk into her store, press an interview, or post a single selfie without the comments section exploding into war. Some fans defended her fiercely, calling her the heart of the franchise, while others mocked her for being played by Mona again. One fan tweet even went viral. Rasheeda fought for loyalty in a world built on lies, and now she's drowning in her own trust. She read it twice, her eyes burning, before tossing her phone aside. She didn't deserve this, not after everything she'd given the show. Across town, Mona Scott sat in her office surrounded by production notes, pretending the chaos didn't shake her. She'd been in this game too long to show nerves. Her assistant entered quietly, placing a folder on her desk. "The network's asking if we're still going with the new narrative," she said carefully. Mona didn't look up. "Yes," she replied flatly. "Rasheeda wants to play hardball. Let's give her the full experience." She leaned back in her chair, thinking about the years of loyalty, the dinners, the late-night phone calls where Rasheeda would vent and Mona would listen like a sister. It used to mean something. Now it just felt like old footage from a show that no longer got ratings. K. Michelle, on the other hand, was enjoying the spectacle. She'd always had a complicated history with Rasheeda, one that started with petty jabs and grew into open hostility. Now, watching the narrative shift in her favor, she felt vindicated. During an Instagram Live, a fan asked her directly, "Did you meet Mona to talk about Rasheeda?" She smirked, leaned closer to the camera, and said, "Baby, all I'll say is karma, don't lose addresses." Within seconds, blogs clipped it, titled it, "K. Michelle breaks her silence," and the internet lost its mind. Rasheeda saw that clip too. She replayed it 3 times, each time feeling her stomach twist tighter. Kirk found her pacing the living room, muttering under her breath, "She's laughing about it." Kirk, laughing like it's a joke. Kirk rubbed his temples. "You can't fight every rumor People are gonna say what they want. You post something back, they'll twist that too." But Rasheeda wasn't listening. Her eyes were set on her phone, scrolling through messages from other cast members. One from Erica read, "Girl, they've been planning this. Mona been telling people you too scripted now." Another from Mimi simply said, "Watch your back. Too many snakes out here." It was late that night when Rasheeda finally decided she wasn't going to stay quiet. She opened her Instagram again, this time going live. "Since everybody wanna talk," she began, her tone steady but cutting. "Let's talk. I've been loyal to people who ain't deserve it. I've protected folks who'd throw me under the bus the minute it got them trending. But God don't sleep." The comments flooded instantly, thousands of viewers, fans, even industry insiders tuning in. She didn't name names, but she didn't have to. When she said, "Funny how producers play God, but forget even they can get edited out," everyone knew exactly who she meant. By morning, the clip was everywhere. Entertainment blogs ran headlines like "Rasheeda fires back. Mona and K. Michelle exposed in IG Live rant." Mona woke up to her phone vibrating non-stop, texts from executives, publicists, and even old cast members asking if she planned to respond. She didn't. Not yet. She understood that silence had power. Let the internet talk itself into exhaustion before she made her move. "The longer I wait," she told K. Michelle over the phone, "the more people will wonder if she's telling the truth. Curiosity drives clicks." Kay laughed on the other end. "You really the puppet master, huh?" Mona smiled faintly. "Always have been." But what Mona didn't know was that someone inside her own production team had started recording meetings, private conversations where she discussed manipulating the narrative, changing storylines, and reframing footage. One of those recordings had already made its way into the hands of a gossip blogger known for dropping bombs on the Love and Hip Hop cast. The blogger, who went by the handle @AdultTechQueen, was preparing to upload a 2-minute clip with the caption, "Mona caught plotting against Rasheeda. Receipts inside." The clip dropped that evening, and within an hour, it was trending. In it, Mona's voice could be clearly heard saying, "If Rasheeda wants to act like the boss, let's show her how messy she really is. We'll make her look like she started it." Her calm, calculating tone stunned everyone. Fans who once worshipped her for building the show were now calling her manipulative, even evil. How could she do that to Rasheeda? One comment read. Another said, "Mona's been exposed. She's no producer, she's a puppeteer." K. Michelle tried to contain the fallout by tweeting, "Don't believe everything you hear. People love fake receipts." But it was too late. The audio was undeniable. Even people close to Mona were turning on her. One cast member anonymously told the Jasmine brand, "We all knew she was controlling, but this is next level." The network called an emergency meeting to discuss damage control. And for the first time, Mona Scott felt something she hadn't felt in years: panic. She called K. Michelle again that night. "This wasn't supposed to leak," she said, pacing her living room. "Someone from the inside did this. Kay sounded tense. You think it was Rasheeda? Mona paused. No, this feels closer. Someone from my own team. Silence stretched between them. Mona's mind raced. Who could have done it? And worse, what else did they have? On the other side of town, Rasheeda sat with her phone in hand, watching the clip on loop. Kirk stood behind her, silent. When it ended, she whispered, "You hear that? She said it. She planned it." Kirk nodded slowly. "Yeah, and now everyone knows." She took a deep breath. Nah, they don't know the half. It's time they do. She picked up her phone again, but this time she wasn't posting. She was calling someone. "Hey," she said when the voice answered. "Yeah, it's time. I'm ready to tell everything. No filters. No editing. Let's do it live." The voice on the other end laughed softly. "You sure, Rasheeda? Once you start, you can't stop it." "I know," she said quietly. And that's exactly the point. Within hours, teasers began circulating for an exclusive tell-all. Interviewer Rasheeda Frost sitting down with a popular blogger to set the record straight. The promo clip showed her staring into the camera, eyes hard. "They thought they could rewrite my story," she said, "but I'm the one holding the pen." The countdown was on. Fans flooded the comments with excitement and support. Hashtags like hashtag Team Rasheeda and hashtag Mona Exposed trended across platforms. Mona's empire was shaking, and for the first time, she wasn't the one directing the narrative. As the sun set over Atlanta that evening, to women once allies, now rivals prepared for a showdown that would define everything. Mona Scott, the architect of countless reality TV empires, versus Rasheeda Frost, the woman who finally refused to be scripted. Neither of them knew how far the fallout would go, but both understood one thing clearly. There was no turning back now. The night of the interview arrived, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Atlanta was restless. Every gossip blog, every podcast, every fan page was tuned in, waiting to see if Rasheeda would finally name names. The studio lights burned bright as she sat across from the host, a sleek mic in front of her and her hands clasped tight in her lap. The mic in front of her and her hands clasped tight in her lap. The audience was silent except for the hum of anticipation. When the cameras started rolling, she took a deep breath, her voice steady but low. "People think reality TV is just entertainment," she began. "But behind those cameras, there's real pain, real betrayal, and real lives being twisted for someone else's story." The host leaned forward. "Rasheeda, let's get right to it. There's a recording circulating online of Mona Scott discussing how to frame you negatively in the show. Did you hear it?" Rasheeda nodded slowly. "I did, and I'm not surprised. I've seen things like that happen for years, just never thought I'd be next." She paused, eyes darkening. "The truth is, I stayed loyal. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken, because I thought silence meant respect. But now I only gave them room to rewrite my truth." As she spoke, clips from old seasons played on the screen behind her. Moments of laughter, tears, reunions, arguments. Scenes that once looked spontaneous now felt staged. The audience murmured. The host pressed on. "So you're saying, Mona deliberately tried to ruin your image?" Rasheeda didn't flinch. "I'm saying she forgot I was human. I'm not a storyline. I'm a person." And when she sat down with Michelle to talk about me like I was just another headline, that's when I knew I had to walk away from all of it. Back at Mona's office, the interview streamed live on 3 screens. Her staff stood frozen, unsure whether to look at her or the footage. Mona didn't say a word. She just stared at Rasheeda's face on the screen, her jaw tight. Michelle called mid-broadcast, but Mona ignored it. She could already feel the shift. This wasn't just another scandal. This was an uprising. Fans who once adored her as the queen of reality TV were now calling for her to be replaced. The network's social media team sent her a message, mid-show. "We need a response, ASAP. Your silence is fueling this." When the interview ended, Rasheeda's final words hit like a dagger. "I don't hate Mona," she said quietly, "but I see her now, and that's worse." The audience erupted in applause. Within minutes, hashtags exploded again. Hashtag RASHEEDA speaks, hashtag justice for RASHEEDA, hashtag cancel Mona. The clip was everywhere, posted, remixed, dissected. Even celebrities began weighing in. One R&B singer tweeted, "Mona been exploiting people for years. It's about time somebody spoke up." That night, Mona finally broke her silence. She went live on Instagram, sitting in her office, face bare, tone controlled. "I've been in this business a long time," she began. "I've seen stories twisted, moments exaggerated, people edited out of context. But I have never set out to destroy anyone's career. She paused for effect, letting the comments scroll. What you're seeing online is not the full picture. That recording, spliced, cut, manipulated. People love to see the queen fall. But I'm not going anywhere. She ended the live abruptly, leaving her followers divided. Some believed her, others called her out for deflecting. But the damage was done. The network issued a statement the next morning, saying they were reviewing internal production ethics and taking concerns seriously. Rumors swirled that Mona might be temporarily suspended while an internal audit took place. Michelle tried to defend her in a series of tweets, writing, "People forget what this woman built. She made stars. Without Mona, half y'all wouldn't even know our names." But her defense only made things worse. Fans accused her of being complicit. "You were in on it." One follower wrote. "You plotted with her." Meanwhile, Rasheeda's image had never looked stronger. Interviews poured in. She was booked on talk shows, invited to panels about authenticity in media. Her store sales doubled overnight, yet behind her calm public demeanor, she was still shaken. In private, she confessed to Kirk, "It feels weird. I got what I wanted, the truth's out, but it don't feel like winning. It feels like something broke that can't be fixed." Kirk nodded. "That's because it did. Some things, once they crack, you can't glue back together." But not everyone wanted to see peace. Inside the Love and Hip Hop production team, certain producers were panicking. Without Mona, the show risked losing its signature chaos. One of them reached out to a gossip blogger, offering inside info in exchange for anonymity. "The real story," they said, "is that Mona had dirt on everybody. If she goes down, she's taking half the cast with her." Within hours, another bombshell article dropped, this time revealing alleged behind-the-scenes feuds, unpaid cast members, and staged storylines dating back years. The article included text, screenshots, production schedules, and even a list of planned conflicts for upcoming seasons. The internet exploded again. Now it wasn't just Mona under fire, it was the entire franchise. "This show is fake." Fans screamed online, "We've been watching lies." Sponsors began pulling out. The network's stock dipped slightly by day's end. Mona watched it unfold quietly, scrolling through the chaos like someone watching their own empire burn. Michelle called again. But this time Mona answered, "You seeing this mess?" Kay said, half laughing, half scared. "They turning on everybody." Mona's voice was flat. "They were never loyal to anybody, Kay. That's the business. The moment you stop feeding them drama, they eat you instead." Still, deep inside, something in her twisted for the first time. She questioned if she'd gone too far. She looked at an old framed photo on her desk, her Rasheeda and Kirk smiling during Season 2's wrap party. Back then, everything felt easier. Back then, she wasn't the villain. But now, that same picture looked like evidence. Evidence of trust betrayed, power abused, and a friendship destroyed for ratings. 3 days later, a network executive called Mona into a private meeting. "We need to make changes," they said. "The brand's reputation is in trouble. We're temporarily halting production until this settles." Mona sat there, expression unreadable. "So that's it?" she asked. "After everything I built." The exec sighed. "You built it, yes, but you also broke it. Take some time off, Mona. This storm needs to pass." She stood, collected her phone, and left without another word. Outside, paparazzi waited like vultures. Flashes went off as she walked to her car, her sunglasses hiding the exhaustion in her eyes. Questions flew. "Mona, are you fired? Did you really plot against Rasheeda? Do you regret what you did?" But she didn't answer a single one. She just opened the car door, slid in, and told her driver, "Take me home." As the car pulled away, her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. She hesitated, then opened it. It was a single line. "You think this is over. It's not." Her breath caught. No name, no context. But she knew, this wasn't over. Not even close. As the lights dimmed in the studio, Rasheeda sat quietly in the dressing room, staring at her reflection. Her eyes told a story of exhaustion mixed with regret. For years, she had held herself together as the strong, unshakable woman everyone admired on Love and Hip Hop, but behind the scenes, things were collapsing. The rumors, the betrayals, the fake friendships, everything had started to eat away at her peace. The silence in that small room felt heavier than any argument ever could. She took a deep breath, remembering the countless times she had defended people who later turned on her, especially Yandy, the same woman she once called her sister in Everything But Blood. Now, that bond was a scar. Earlier that day, the producers had tried to get her and Yandy to film a sit-down to clear the air. Rasheeda refused. She was tired of pretending. The cameras had caught enough of her pain over the years, and she wasn't about to give them more. Kirk had tried to talk her into it, saying it would be good for the show. But even he knew that this time, she wasn't just mad, she was done. There's a difference between anger and closure, and Rasheeda was chasing the latter. Outside, the crew buzzed about gossip that Yandy was already spinning the narrative, saying Rasheeda was being dramatic, emotional, and doing too much, the usual lines used to dismiss a woman's real feelings. But Rasheeda didn't care anymore. She had receipts, years of private conversations, screenshots, broken promises, and moments where she had stood by Yandy's side only to be left humiliated. It wasn't about revenge. It was about finally speaking without the weight of keeping someone else's secrets. Later, when the cameras rolled, Rasheeda stepped onto the set with a calmness that made even the producers nervous. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't crying, she was clear. People love to talk about loyalty, she said softly, but loyalty without respect is just slavery. The room froze, every word cut through the air like a blade. Yandy tried to interrupt, but Rasheeda kept talking, her voice steady, almost cold. She spoke about how she had defended Yandy during times when everyone else had turned their backs. How she had believed in her, how she had thought they were real friends beyond the cameras and contracts. But when it came time for Yandy to show up for her side, after the filming, there was chaos. Yandy stormed off, claiming Rasheeda was trying to use her name for clout, but everyone knew that wasn't true. The industry had its rules, and one of them was simple: never let your image get bruised. Yandy had built her brand on being the caring, unshakable businesswoman. Admitting fault wasn't part of that image. But Rasheeda didn't need the sympathy of fans. She just wanted peace. Back at home, Kirk watched as Rasheeda sat at the dining table, scrolling through old texts. He didn't say anything. Over the years, he had learned that sometimes silence was the only way to respect her storm. "You okay?" he asked finally. She nodded, though her eyes told another story. "Yeah. I just wish I'd seen people for who they were earlier," she murmured. "I kept thinking if I loved harder, if I forgave more, maybe they'd change." Kirk sighed, knowing that kind of loyalty was both her gift and her curse. The next morning, social media was in flames. Clips from the show were everywhere. Hashtags, memes, fan edits, everyone was talking about the fallout. Some sided with Rasheeda, praising her for finally speaking her truth. Others called her bitter, but behind the noise, she stayed silent. No interviews, no statements. Just a few quiet posts about self-respect and growth. She knew that every word she didn't say hurt her enemies more than the ones she could have shouted. As the days passed, old friends started reaching out. People who had once ghosted her during her low points. That's how it always went in the entertainment world. People loved you when you were trending. Rasheeda didn't respond. She had learned that peace wasn't found in who cheered for you the loudest, but in who stayed when the applause faded. Late one night, she sat outside on the porch with her phone in her hand. A message draft blinked on the screen. It was a text to Yandy that she had written 100 times but never sent. It read, "You know what hurts most? Not what you did, but how easy it was for you to forget everything we went through." She stared at it for a long moment before deleting it again. Some closures, she decided, don't need an audience or a reply. In the following weeks, Yandy tried to do damage control, appearing on podcasts and interviews, subtly painting herself as the misunderstood victim. But fans were not blind. Clips, old posts, and behind-the-scenes whispers began resurfacing. It wasn't just Rasheeda who had been hurt. Others came forward too. Patterns emerged, the same ones Rasheeda had been silent about for years. Her truth was finally visible without her needing to lift a finger. Rasheeda spent more time at her boutique, focusing on work. The cameras tried to follow, but she limited their access. She wanted her narrative back. Not the one producers could twist for ratings, but the one that showed her strength beyond drama. When asked by a close friend if she'd ever forgive Yandy, she smiled faintly. "Forgiveness isn't about her, it's for me. I just don't need to pretend we were ever real friends again." Still, the wound lingered. Every time she saw old clips of them laughing together on screen, it felt surreal, like watching a version of herself she no longer recognized. But maybe that was the price of growth. Realizing that not every chapter deserves a reunion. The more she healed, the less she cared about how others saw her story. Because for the first time in years, The woman in the mirror wasn't performing, she was free. Weeks passed, but the tension between Rasheeda and Yandi refused to fade. The producers sensed it too, milking every bit of it for ratings. Every conversation turned into speculation. Every post became a headline. Fans dissected their lives like detectives, searching for clues about what really broke their friendship. Rasheeda, however, had gone quiet. She wasn't feeding the chaos anymore. The more people demanded an explanation, the more she withdrew into herself. Peace had become her rebellion. The industry thrived on noise, but she found strength in silence. Still, even in that silence, she could feel Yandi's shadow everywhere through mutual friends, through the whispers of castmates trying to stay on both sides. The tension finally boiled over during a promotional shoot in Atlanta. The entire cast had gathered for a group photo, pretending to smile through the awkward air. Yandi stood a few feet away, her expression polished, her energy distant. The photographer asked them to stand closer, but Rasheeda didn't move. The crew exchanged nervous glances, knowing that any small spark could reignite the fire. Kirk leaned toward her, whispering for her to let it go, but she couldn't. Not anymore. When trust is broken that deeply, pretending becomes a form of self-betrayal. She stayed where she was, shoulders squared, eyes forward. Later, that single photo would go viral, fans noticing the visible gap between the two women and calling it the quiet war. Back home, Rasheeda scrolled through the comments. Some mocked her, others supported her, but most just wanted drama. That was the nature of fame. People loved watching you fall apart because it reminded them of their own survival. She put her phone down and walked outside, breathing in the cool night air. Somewhere deep inside, she wondered if Yandi missed her, not for the cameras, but as a person. Friendships like theirs didn't just vanish. They dissolved slowly, like ink in water, until all that was left was a faint stain of what once was. Then came the reunion taping, a dreaded event where everyone's truths and lies clashed under studio lights. The atmosphere backstage was electric with gossip and anxiety. People rehearsed their lines, trying to control the narrative. Yandi arrived late, dressed sharply, her posture commanding attention. When her eyes met Rasheeda's, it was a split second of quiet recognition. Two women who knew each other's deepest wounds yet stood worlds apart. When the cameras began rolling, the host wasted no time. "There's been a lot of talk about your friendship," he said, looking between them. "Can you both tell us what went wrong?" Yandi gave a diplomatic smile. "I think people just love to exaggerate things. Me and Rasheeda, we go way back. We've had disagreements like sisters do, but there's no hate. It was polished, practiced, safe." But Rasheeda didn't blink. She leaned slightly forward and spoke. Not with anger, but with clarity. "No hate, but no honesty either. Sometimes, people hide behind love when what they really mean is control." The room went silent. Even the host looked unsure how to respond. Yandi's smile faltered, just for a second, before she regained her composure. Throughout the taping, their energy filled the room. Every subtle look, every pause carried weight. It wasn't the shouting match the producers had hoped for, it was colder, heavier. When the reunion aired, fans described it as one of the most uncomfortable yet powerful moments in the show's history. The contrast between Rasheeda's quiet strength and Yandi's carefully managed calmness told a deeper story than any confession could. After the show, Yandi tried to reach out privately. She sent a message saying she missed their friendship and wished things could go back to how they were. Rasheeda read it, felt a sting in her chest, then locked her phone. She wasn't angry anymore, but some doors, once closed, should never reopen. She had spent too long rebuilding herself to risk collapsing again. Still, the world kept spinning around their fallout. Blogs published exclusive takes, fans speculated about who was right or wrong, and every clip from their old friendship resurfaced. But something shifted inside Rasheeda. She realized she didn't owe anyone an explanation for her healing. For too long, she had lived to protect others from the truth, even when it hurt her. Now, she was protecting her peace instead. In private moments, though, memories crept in. Nights when they had laughed until their stomachs hurt, times they had defended each other fiercely. Fame had twisted those moments into weapons. The entertainment world thrived on betrayal because loyalty didn't sell. She wondered if, in another life, away from cameras and contracts, they might have remained real friends. But that version of life no longer existed. A few weeks later, during an interview promoting her boutique, the host cautiously brought up Yandi's name. Rasheeda smiled faintly, her tone calm but final. "I don't hold grudges," she said, "but I've learned that peace sometimes means loving people from a distance." The clip spread everywhere. Fans quoted her words, calling them powerful and mature. Even some of her critics admitted that the way she handled it showed growth. She wasn't the same woman who once let others dictate her narrative. She had reclaimed it piece by piece. Behind the scenes, Kirk noticed the difference too. She laughed more at home, slept better, spent time with her kids without constantly checking her phone. He knew she had finally detached from the emotional weight she had been carrying. But fame is never quiet for long. Rumors began circulating again, claims that Yandi was planning to release her own truth in a tell-all podcast episode. Rasheeda didn't react. She knew her silence would speak louder than any response ever could. By the time the episode aired, it was already too late. Fans compared every word, every contradiction, and realized that the collected version of Rasheeda they now saw wasn't bitter. She was free. She didn't need to expose anyone. The truth had already revealed itself. But freedom in the reality world never lasts. The calm after the storm is just another setup for a bigger explosion. And that explosion came one humid Friday night when Mona Scott called for an emergency production meeting. Rasheeda wasn't invited, at least not officially. Yet her name came up again and again as the topic of discussion. The meeting took place in a glass-walled office overlooking the Atlanta skyline. The kind of space where power decisions were made with soft voices and sharp smiles. Mona sat at the head of the table, her tone measured but cold. "The show needs a shakeup," she said, scanning the faces of her team. "And if Rasheeda won't give us drama, we'll build it ourselves." Someone hesitated to respond, but Mona waved a manicured hand. "We've coddled her too long. She wants peace." "Fine, we'll turn her peace into controversy." Across the table sat Kay. Michelle, casually stirring her iced coffee. She smirked. "You know she's not gonna like that. She'll say you're exploiting her again." Mona met her gaze. "She can say whatever she wants. She's part of the brand, and the brand runs on chaos. If she doesn't feed it, it dies." There was a pause, an unspoken understanding that in this world, friendship was a luxury none of them could afford. That night, a new storyline was drafted, one that would pull Rasheeda back into the narrative whether she wanted it or not. The plot centered on a supposed betrayal involving a close friend and hidden finances. All fiction, all cleverly orchestrated to look real. The crew was instructed to film select moments from old footage and piece them together to create tension. Michelle didn't look entirely comfortable with it. She had agreed to many things for TV before, but this felt different. "Mona, you're playing with fire," she warned. "If she finds out what you're doing, it's gonna blow up." Mona only replied, "Then let it." Explosions make great television. Days later, social media lit up again. A mysterious preview clip from the upcoming season showed Rasheeda crying in her store, followed by a voiceover that hinted at betrayal. Fans immediately began speculating. Her name trended for 2 days straight. Blogs claimed she was hiding a secret. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. At first, Rasheeda ignored it, assuming it was another fan-made edit. But when Kirk showed her the official promo posted by Mona's verified account, her stomach dropped. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was manipulation. She called Mona directly. No assistants, no intermediaries, just raw confrontation. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger. Mona's tone remained calm, almost rehearsed. "It's marketing, Rasheeda. Don't take it personal. You know how this works." Rasheeda's response cut through the pretense. "You used my real pain. That's not marketing. That's betrayal." Mona sighed. "You're making it sound deeper than it is. Everyone gets their turn under the light." The line went dead before Rasheeda could reply. For the first time, Rasheeda considered walking away from the show entirely. She had given years of her life, her privacy, her relationships to keep the machine running, and this was how it repaid her. Still, leaving meant giving Mona exactly what she wanted: control over her exit. Kirk tried to calm her, telling her to think before reacting, but her mind was already racing. She wasn't just hurt, she was humiliated. What angered her most was Michelle's silence. She hadn't said a word publicly, and that silence felt like agreement. Rumors deepened when Michelle posted a cryptic tweet. "Truth always finds the loud ones first." It wasn't directed at anyone by name, but fans immediately connected it to Rasheeda. Thousands of retweets followed, each one adding more fuel to the fire. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. What had been an obvious production trick turned into public belief that Rasheeda had indeed betrayed someone. Her name was dragged across every gossip page, her comments flooded with insults and disbelief. She showed up to filming one morning, head held high, but the energy was different. Crew members avoided eye contact, castmates whispered. Even Kirk's presence couldn't anchor her anymore. She could feel the weight of Mona's manipulation pressing on her chest. During a break, Michelle approached her, her tone almost apologetic. "Look, I didn't mean for it to go this far." Rasheeda turned to her slowly, her expression unreadable. "Then why didn't you stop it?" The silence between them stretched, heavy with everything unsaid. K. Michelle shifted uncomfortably. "Mona controls the edits. I can't fight the whole system." Rasheeda's voice was quiet but sharp. "You don't have to fight the system. You just have to stop feeding it." She walked away before K. Michelle could respond, leaving her standing there under the bright studio lights, exposed and uncertain. By the end of that week, Mona's plan had succeeded. The show was trending everywhere. Advertisers were thrilled, ratings spiked, and the narrative was locked. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. Crew members whispered about a growing rift within production. Even Mona's closest allies began to question whether she had gone too far this time. What none of them realized was that Rasheeda wasn't retreating in defeat, she was planning her response. She knew that in this industry, revenge didn't come from rage, it came from patience. And she was willing to wait. Weeks later, that patience turned into something sharper. Rasheeda had gone quiet publicly, but privately, she was collecting proof-fold texts, behind-the-scenes footage, emails from producers who had started to regret their part in the scheme. The truth had a way of slipping through cracks, and she was learning how to use it. Kirk watched her late at night, hunched over her laptop, the glow reflecting off her face. "You sure you want to go down this road?" he asked once, half concerned, half proud. She didn't look up. "They built this story about me. I'm just giving them a real one." The breaking point came when she received a message from a crew member who had quietly recorded part of that secret meeting between Mona and K. Michelle. The audio was grainy but unmistakable. Mona's voice saying, "Rasheeda thinks she's untouchable. Let's see how she handles losing control." K. Michelle's reply was a nervous laugh, followed by, "You know she's gonna come for you if this leaks." And Mona's cold response, "She can try." Rasheeda played it 3 times, her heart pounding harder each time. There it was, proof that everything she'd suspected was real. The next morning, she walked into the studio like a storm. Crew members turned to watch her, sensing something different in the air. Mona was already inside, surrounded by assistants. Mid-conversation, Rasheeda didn't wait for introductions. She placed her phone on the table and pressed play. Mona froze as her own voice echoed back at her, every word clear and undeniable. The assistants went silent. K. Michelle's eyes widened from across the room. Her face pale. When the recording ended, the only sound was the quiet hum of the studio lights. "You plotted against me," Rasheeda said softly. "And you did it on my time, with my name, on my show." Mona recovered quickly, her tone sharp and dismissive. "That audio could be edited. You know how people twist things." Rasheeda leaned closer. "Then explain why your voice is on it. Explain why the same people who filmed for you are now sending me the truth." Mona's expression hardened, but for the first time, she looked rattled. "Be careful, Rasheeda. I built this empire. Don't make me remind you where you stand." Rasheeda smiled faintly. "You built the stage, Mona, but the audience, that's mine." Within days, the recording leaked, not by Rasheeda's hands, someone else had done it, but it didn't matter. The internet erupted, fans were outraged. Hashtags demanding Mona's accountability filled timelines. People replayed the audio, dissecting every second. The empire Mona had spent years building was suddenly under fire from the same audience that had once worshipped it. She released a statement, denying everything, calling it taken out of context, but no one bought it. Sponsors began asking questions, and production was temporarily halted for internal review. K. Michelle tried to reach out again. This time her voice trembled over the phone. "I didn't want it to happen like that," she said. "Mona made me feel like I didn't have a choice." Rasheeda's response was calm. "You always had a choice. You just didn't use it." There was a long pause, the kind that comes when 2 people finally understand that nothing will ever be the same. "You're right, K." Michelle whispered, "But you won." Rasheeda didn't answer. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like breaking free from a cage she hadn't realized she'd built herself. The next few weeks became a media circus. Interviews, headlines, fan debates, everyone had an opinion. But through it all, Rasheeda stayed grounded. She gave one exclusive interview where she said, "I'm not here to destroy anyone. I just want people to see what happens when power gets confused with manipulation." Her words went viral. Even people outside the love and hip-hop fandom started talking about it, framing her as the underdog who finally stood up to the system. Behind closed doors, Mona tried to repair her image. She called emergency meetings with the network, promising new shows and spin-offs to distract from the scandal. But the damage was done. People had seen the cracks in her control, and those cracks widened every time she spoke. K. Michelle's reputation took a hit. 2 fans accused her of enabling the setup. of choosing fame over loyalty. She posted a tearful video online, apologizing to Rasheeda and admitting she'd been manipulated by the promise of creative opportunity. It was emotional, raw, and sincere enough to earn her some sympathy. But the internet never forgets. Meanwhile, Rasheeda focused on rebuilding what mattered. She poured herself into her businesses, into her family, into living a life that wasn't constantly filmed. She knew the cameras would call her back eventually, but this time, she'd be on her own terms. One night, as she closed her boutique, she looked out at the quiet Atlanta streets and thought of how strange it was. The same city that had watched her rise and fall was now watching her rebirth. Fame had taken a lot from her, but it had also taught her how to stand alone. Still, the story didn't end there. Mona wasn't finished. Somewhere in the background, plans were being made. A new season, a new narrative, and whispers of a Talal documentary that could rewrite everything. And as Rasheeda locked up and walked to her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that the next storm was already forming. By the time summer hit, Atlanta was buzzing again, but not from the usual club gossip. The city was split, half defending Mona, half standing with Rasheeda. Podcasts, gossip, blogs, and Instagram lives turned into battlegrounds. Everyone had a source close to the situation. The leaked audio had become proof of how ugly the entertainment business could get when power and ego collided. Mona, for the first time in her career, was losing control of the narrative. She hated it. She had built her empire on keeping the audience guessing. But now the audience had turned on her. The network called for crisis management. Publicists, legal teams, and producers filled conference rooms, trying to figure out how to stop the bleeding. "We need a distraction," one executive said, tapping a pen on the table. "We need something bigger. Something shocking." Mona listened quietly, her expression unreadable. "No," she said finally, "we don't distract. We reclaim." She leaned forward, her voice dropping lower. "We're going to make this story ours again. And we're going to use Rasheeda to do it." The room went still. One brave assistant spoke. "How? She's done with the show. She won't film." Mona smirked. "She will if she thinks she's in control." Her plan was as bold as it was manipulative. She ordered a new spin-off announcement behind the scenes documentary promising to show the real story of love and hip-hop, Atlanta from every angle. The hook was simple. Everyone would get to tell their side. The press release made it sound empowering, transparent, even redemptive. But the true intention was clear: pull Rasheeda back in, get her on camera, then twist the footage to rebuild Mona's image. The internet lit up instantly. Hashtags like #real, LHHATL, and #RASHEEDA speaks flooded social media. Fans begged Rasheeda to participate. She refused at first, but the pressure grew when one of her closest friends, Mimi, called and said, "You should do it, girl. Tell your truth before someone else does." Kirk was against it. "They'll trap you again," he warned. "They'll spin whatever you say." But Rasheeda couldn't ignore how the world kept reshaping her story without her. She didn't want revenge anymore. She wanted clarity. So she agreed, but with one condition: full creative control over her segment. Mona accepted publicly, but smiled privately. She knew once the cameras rolled, control would shift again. The first day of filming was tense. Cameras were everywhere, but the energy was colder than ever. Mona watched from the director's chair, trying to mask her curiosity. When Rasheeda walked in, the entire set fell quiet. She didn't say hello. She didn't need to. She sat down, adjusted her mic, and looked straight into the lens. "You've seen what they wanted you to see," she began. "Now you'll hear what they didn't show you." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were fierce. For the next hour, she spoke about manipulation, about being edited into storylines she never agreed to, about the emotional toll of being turned into a character instead of a person. Even Mona couldn't look away. This wasn't the submissive version of Rasheeda she'd once directed. This was someone reborn from betrayal. And when Michelle joined the interview later that day, the air turned electric. She sat across from Rasheeda, visibly nervous. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said softly. "I just need to own what I did." Rasheeda watched her for a moment before answering. "I don't need an apology. I just need honesty." The two women talked for nearly an hour. It wasn't pretty. There were tears, confessions, awkward silences, but it was real, and for the first time, fans watching the leaks online could see both sides. Two women who had been used, both by the system and by their own ambition. The footage spread faster than the producers could contain it. Clips trended on Twitter. Fan edits flooded YouTube, and suddenly, the audience wasn't mocking them anymore, they were supporting them. Mona's plan had backfired. Instead of reclaiming the story, she had exposed her own control. Even her staff began to turn distant, whispering about her downfall. The network, sensing opportunity, shifted their loyalty. They quietly offered Rasheeda and Michelle, an executive producer, credit for a new limited series focusing on women rebuilding their careers after reality TV. The move blindsided Mona. She found out from a press release, her own legacy overshadowed by the very people she'd once controlled. The tension between them reached one final peak during a private meeting arranged by the network. Rasheeda, Michelle, and Mona sat in the same room for the first time since everything had exploded. Mona broke the silence first. "You really think you can run this without me?" she asked. Rasheeda didn't flinch. "I don't need to run it. I just need it to be honest." Michelle added quietly. "We're not your cast anymore. We're creators now." Mona exhaled slowly, her eyes narrowing. "You'll learn soon enough. Truth doesn't sell." Her eyes narrowing. "You'll learn soon enough. Truth doesn't sell. Chaos does." Rasheeda leaned forward, her tone steady. "Then we'll sell peace and see who buys it." The meeting ended with no handshake, no agreement, just three women walking away in different directions. But the power balance had shifted forever. Mona's reign wasn't over, but it was no longer unchallenged. And as cameras rolled for the final scenes of the documentary, the audience could feel it too, the end of one era and the uncertain beginning of another. Rasheeda left the set late that night, exhausted but lighter than she'd felt in years. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, and for the first time, she didn't feel like part of someone else's story. She was writing her own. But even as she drove home, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The text read, "This isn't over. You think I don't have footage too?" There was no name, but she didn't need one. She already knew who it was. The silence that followed was almost unbearable, stretching longer than anyone expected. Kirk sat back, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on nothing, while Rasheeda's hands trembled against her lap. Jasmine stood nearby, her voice breaking as she muttered that she never wanted things to go this far. But by now, the damage was done, and every unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. The cameras, once background noise, now felt like prison guards recording every breath, every tear, every lie. Somewhere deep down, each of them knew there was no turning back. This wasn't just another fight. This was the beginning of the end. When Kirk finally spoke, his tone was sharp but hollow, like a man who had already lost something he couldn't name. He said he was tired of being blamed, tired of the spotlight, tired of pretending to hold everything together. Rasheeda stared at him, her eyes empty, and replied softly that she had been tired for years. Her words didn't need to be shouted to hit him like a storm. Jasmine, unsure whether to leave or stay, took a step back, but the tension kept her frozen. She whispered that she wished she had never met either of them. Kirk turned his gaze toward her, then back at Rasheeda, realizing that the chaos he created was now too tangled to escape. In that moment, the love they once had was nothing more than smoke fading into the night. Outside, the crew whispered among themselves, unsure whether to keep filming or cut the scene. But drama this raw couldn't be staged. It was heartbreak laid bare for the world to see. As Kirk stormed out, slamming the door so hard the sound echoed, Rasheeda finally let the tears fall. Jasmine quietly followed, leaving the house that had once felt like a dream but now reeked of betrayal. The quiet that filled the room afterward wasn't peace, it was the sound of 3 lives collapsing at once. Hours later, Rasheeda sat alone, staring at her phone as messages poured in from fans and castmates, everyone desperate to know what really happened. She didn't reply. How could she? How do you explain a love story that burned itself to ashes on live TV? She scrolled through old photos, seeing the smiles that once felt real, the vacations that now looked staged, the promises that never stood a chance. Each image was a ghost of the life she thought she had. Outside, the city buzzed like nothing had changed, but inside her chest, everything had, and though she didn't know it yet, this wasn't the end of her story, it was the start of something darker, rawer, more honest than she had ever shown before. The next morning, headlines exploded. Rasheeda breaks down after Kirk's shocking exit. Jasmine spotted leaving Frost home in tears. Everyone had an opinion, and none of them cared about the truth. Interviews, gossip, reaction videos, they all fed on the mess that love and hip-hop had become. Mona Scott, watching the footage, knew she had a goldmine, but to the people living it, there was no gold, only ruin. Kirk refused to answer calls, hiding somewhere out of reach. Jasmine deleted her socials, and Rasheeda, instead of running from the chaos, decided to face it head-on. When producers came knocking for her next confessional, she didn't wear makeup, didn't style her hair, didn't smile. She looked straight into the camera and said she wasn't going to protect anyone anymore. No edits, no filters, no pretending. Her voice didn't shake this time, She talked about the lies, the late-night arguments, the years she spent forgiving a man who didn't want redemption. She talked about how fame magnified pain, how cameras made everything harder, how love became something to perform instead of feel. The producers were silent when she finished. It wasn't the kind of scene they could manipulate, it was real, uncut truth. Later that night, as the episode aired, social media exploded again, but this time the tone was different. People saw her pain, they heard her exhaustion. Fans began flooding her page with support, telling her to walk away, to rebuild, to choose herself. And for the first time in a long while, she started to believe she could. But the drama wasn't over yet. Kirk resurfaced days later, angry and defensive, giving his own version of events that twisted every truth she had told. He said she was exaggerating, chasing sympathy, trying to make him the villain. It was the same cycle all over again: accusations, interviews, headlines. Yet beneath it all, something in Rasheeda had shifted. She didn't break this time. She didn't fight back online or issue a response. She simply turned off her phone and focused on the silence, the kind that didn't hurt anymore. Jasmine, on the other hand, couldn't escape the whispers. She was labeled every name in the book, blamed for everything that went wrong, even though she was just another casualty in a story that started long before she entered it. She reached out to Rasheeda once, sending a message that read, "I'm sorry for everything." Rasheeda never replied, but deep down, she understood. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation, it meant freedom. And both women needed that more than anything. By the time the reunion show came around, everyone knew this season would go down in history, not for its fights or fashion or soundbites, but because it blurred the line between reality TV and real heartbreak until no one could tell which was which. And when Rasheeda walked onto that stage under the bright studio lights, she carried herself with the quiet power of someone who had survived the worst kind of betrayal, the kind that doesn't come from strangers, but from the people you once trusted with your soul. The reunion started with a calm so fragile it could break with one wrong word. Mona Scott sat center stage, perfectly composed, knowing the tension would ignite soon enough. The audience buzzed, waiting for the kind of chaos only love and hip-hop could deliver. Rasheeda entered first, her silence heavier than any statement. Kirk followed moments later, his face unreadable, and Jasmine took her place across from them, nerves visible in every breath. The cameras zoomed in as Mona began with her trademark smile, asking how everyone felt being back together. Rasheeda spoke first, her tone measured but sharp. She said she wasn't here to perform anymore, she was here to tell the truth. Kirk shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing. He tried to interrupt, but she didn't stop. She told the audience that for years she had been told to keep the image, to protect the brand, to play the wife. She said she did all of that and lost herself in the process. The crowd gasped, some clapping, others whispering. Jasmine looked down, knowing her turn was coming. Mona leaned forward, asking if Rasheeda blamed Jasmine for what happened. Rasheeda shook her head slowly, and said the blame didn't belong to Jasmine. It belonged to the man who kept everyone in his control by feeding them different versions of the truth. Kirk's jaw tightened. He said she was rewriting history, turning their private struggles into entertainment. But Mona's eyes gleamed. This was the moment she waited for. Jasmine finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. She said she had believed everything Kirk told her, that she thought she was special, different, chosen. She looked at Rasheeda and said she was sorry again, not just for what happened, but for believing a lie that ruined them both. Rasheeda nodded, her face softening for the first time all night. Kirk exhaled, muttering that everyone loved to paint him as the villain because it sold better. Mona turned to him, asking if he regretted anything. Kirk hesitated. He looked at both women, the cameras, and the audience before finally saying, "I regret losing control of the story." The audience booed. Mona didn't need to say a word. The silence that followed was louder than anything Kirk could have said. Later in the show, old clips played on the big screen, laughing moments, vacations, arguments that now looked darker in hindsight. Rasheeda watched herself smiling through pain. She remembered too clearly. Jasmine wiped a tear. Kirk kept his head low. When the lights came back on, Mona asked what each of them learned from it all. Jasmine said she learned that love without honesty is poison. Kirk said he learned that fame magnifies every mistake until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Rasheeda said she learned that you can survive anything once you stop trying to please people who thrive on your pain. The audience rose in applause, some shouting her name, but the applause didn't fill the ache in the room, it only echoed the end of something that had consumed years of their lives. When the cameras cut, Mona thanked them all, but her smile lingered longer than usual. She knew this episode would break records. Backstage, the energy was strange. like a storm that had finally passed but left everything drenched. Jasmine sat alone in the corner, scrolling through her phone, deleting old photos. Kirk stood with a producer, trying to defend himself, his words scattered and tired. Rasheeda walked past them quietly, stopping only when Kirk called her name. He asked if this was really how it ended. She looked at him, eyes steady, and said, "It ended a long time ago. Tonight just made it official." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the floor like punctuation marks on a story too painful to continue. Jasmine watched her go, whispering to herself that maybe closure wasn't about getting answers, it was about finally stopping the questions. Later that night, Rasheeda drove home alone. The streets were quiet, the city lights flickering across her windshield. She thought about the years she spent building an image, fixing a marriage, forgiving a man who kept breaking her in new ways. She realized she didn't need the show, the fame, or even the sympathy. She just needed peace. When she got home, she poured herself a glass of water, sat by the window, and let the silence surround her. For once, it didn't feel empty. It felt clean. Jasmine, meanwhile, decided to leave Atlanta for a while. She packed her things, called her mother, and said she needed to start over somewhere. No one knew her name. Kirk stayed behind, chasing appearances, posting cryptic captions online about loyalty and truth. But the comments told another story. People weren't buying it anymore. The fans who once saw him as a misunderstood husband now saw him as a man who couldn't face the wreckage he created. In the weeks that followed, Rasheeda launched a new project, a lifestyle brand built on strength, healing, and real conversations. Interviews called it her rebirth. She smiled politely in every one, never bad-mouthing anyone, but always speaking from a place of calm power. Jasmine, now living quietly out of state, found work behind the scenes, away from the cameras. She no longer wanted to be part of a story written for views. Kirk faded slowly from the spotlight. Deals fell through. Appearances dried up, and people stopped calling. The drama that once made him famous had finally swallowed him whole. And yet, in the quiet aftermath, there was something beautiful, a sense that all three had been freed, even if it came through pain. Rasheeda often said in interviews that sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is stop explaining herself. That became her message, her brand, her truth. And though the world still gossiped, still dissected every old clip and rumor, she had moved beyond it. Love and hip-hop had given her pain, but it had also given her the stage to reclaim her voice. And this time, she used it for herself. Weeks after the reunion aired, the internet was still in flames. Blogs, podcasts, and fan pages dissected every glance, every line, every hidden emotion that flashed across the screen. Hashtags like #TeamRasheeda and #Mona Scott Betrayal started trending again, sparking endless debates about loyalty and manipulation in the reality TV world. Yet behind the noise, something darker was brewing. Insiders began leaking claims that the reunion wasn't the full story. Rumors surfaced that Mona Scott had cut out an entire segment, a heated backstage confrontation that took place after the cameras went off, involving Rasheeda, Kay, Michelle, and Mona herself. It was said to be explosive, emotional, and too real for television. One staff member described it as the moment the producer became part of the drama she created. The scene allegedly started when Rasheeda, still shaken from the reunion, walked backstage to grab her things. She found Mona standing near the dressing room, phone in hand, talking quietly to someone about next season. Rasheeda overheard her saying something about rebranding the storyline and making Kay, Michelle, the new focus. It stopped her in her tracks. She asked, calm but cold, if that was what the secret meeting had been about all along, if Mona and Kay, Michelle had plotted to push her out and make her the villain one last time. Mona, ever composed, said it wasn't like that. She claimed everything was about business, ratings, and the future of the franchise. But Rasheeda wasn't buying it. Her voice rose as she accused Mona of using her pain to build the empire and then discarding her the moment she became inconvenient. Witnesses said Mona didn't flinch. She just stood there, staring, before finally saying, "You knew what this was when you signed up." That one sentence shattered everything. Rasheeda's eyes filled with tears, not from weakness, but from the realization that every moment she thought was real had been a scene in someone else's script. Then Kay, Michelle walked in, unaware of the storm she was walking into. She froze when she saw the two women facing off. Mona turned to her, hoping her presence would calm things, but Rasheeda immediately confronted her too. She asked her why she'd agreed to that secret meeting, why she'd gone along with Mona's plan knowing what it would do to her. Michelle tried to explain that she hadn't plotted anything, that she just wanted to clear the air and maybe work with Mona on a new project, but Rasheeda wasn't having it. She said, You sat in that meeting and let her talk about me like I was disposable. That's not business, that's betrayal. For the first time, Michelle's usual confidence cracked. She admitted that she did meet Mona, but only because she felt used by the franchise too. She said she was tired of being painted as the angry one, the troublemaker, the woman who couldn't move on. She thought teaming up with Mona could give her a chance to reshape her image. She swore she never meant to hurt Rasheeda, but Rasheeda only shook her head. You can't rebuild your image by burning someone else's, she said quietly. There was no shouting after that, just silence, long and heavy. Mona eventually walked away, muttering that she had deadlines to meet. Michelle and Rasheeda stood there, both realizing they'd been players in a much larger game. For years, they had fought each other while someone else wrote the script, edited the moments, and cashed the checks. Now they saw it clearly. Fans only got the drama. They never saw the damage. The producers got the ratings. The women got the scars. Later that night, a leaked voicemail hit the Blogzan audio clip where Mona could allegedly be heard saying, "Rasheeda's storyline is tired. People want something new." It wasn't confirmed, but it sounded real enough to ignite chaos online. The backlash was immediate. Fans called it manipulation. Others defended Mona, saying every show needs fresh energy, but the damage was done. Rasheeda stayed silent at first, letting the public speculate. Then, days later, she posted a single video to her Instagram story. No makeup, no glam, just her voice saying, "I gave them my truth." They turned it into entertainment. Never again. That clip went viral. Thousands of women commented, thanking her for speaking up, calling her an example of strength and resilience. Suddenly, what had begun as reality TV gossip evolved into a conversation about exploitation, authenticity, and the cost of fame. Other cast members started speaking out too, hinting that the so-called storylines were built from real pain and forced into false narratives. Michelle, perhaps realizing the tide had turned, reached out privately to Rasheeda. This time, it wasn't for the cameras. She sent her a message saying, "Maybe we were both used more than we knew." Rasheeda replied simply, "We were." Mona, meanwhile, faced pressure from the network to respond. She went on a podcast to herself, claiming that the show gave everyone a platform, not a prison. She said, if anyone felt exploited, it was because they didn't understand how television worked. The statement backfired. Fans accused her of gaslighting, saying she'd built her empire on the tears of Black women who trusted her to protect their stories. Memes flooded Twitter, some showing Mona as a puppet master, others showing Rasheeda breaking free from strings. The controversy only grew when one of Mona's former assistants anonymously claimed that the secret meeting had indeed been about replacing Rasheeda with Michelle as the new core storyline. According to the assistant, the goal was to shift attention to a fresh narrative before ratings dipped. The assistant even said Mona had called Rasheeda to calm now, saying the audience missed the fire she once had. It painted a chilling picture of how disposable loyalty could become when fame and profit were involved. By the third week, it wasn't just gossip blogs covering the story, it had made its way to mainstream outlets. Talk shows invited former reality stars to discuss the blurred line between entertainment and exploitation. Everyone had an opinion, but the one person who stayed silent was Rasheeda. She didn't post, didn't tweet, didn't grant interviews, and that silence became louder than any statement she could have made. Fans began saying she was reclaiming her peace, a phrase that soon turned into a movement. People started using it as a hashtag, posting about walking away from toxic workplaces, fake friendships, and performative relationships. What started as Mona's secret meeting had transformed into something far bigger than any TV plot in Awakening. And yet, beneath all the noise, Mona was already planning her next move. The network couldn't afford to lose her. She was still the mastermind of the brand. She started quietly assembling a new cast, fresh faces, new drama, but this time, something felt different. The public's perception had shifted. People no longer saw the chaos as pure entertainment, they saw it as human cost. And Mona, the woman who once controlled every narrative, was suddenly facing one she couldn't rewrite. As the tension reached its peak online, the world of Atlanta's entertainment scene began to fracture. What was once tight-lipped loyalty among producers, editors, and cast members now became a leaking dam of secrets. One by one, anonymous insiders began sharing files, call logs, and text threads allegedly showing how storylines were shaped to amplify, betrayal, and destroy real friendships for higher ratings. Among those messages were ones reportedly between Mona Scott and senior producers, discussing the now infamous hotel meeting with Michelle. One message read, "Rasheeda's narrative is stale, fans need a shock next season." Another said, "Let K play the redemption card to tell flip public sympathy." The leaks caught fire immediately, sending the internet into meltdown. The fans felt cheated, like their emotions had been toyed with for years. And this time, even people inside the industry began speaking up. Several ex-producers confirmed what many already suspected. The line between reality and manipulation was long gone. They described late-night meetings where story arcs were rewritten to heighten conflict, where tears became tools, and where women's pain was packaged as entertainment. One producer admitted they had been told to keep Rasheeda in the loop just enough to make her trust the process. The revelation broke something in the fandom. It wasn't just a show anymore, it was a betrayal of authenticity. People who had followed these women for years began demanding justice, accountability, and truth. Mona's empire started to tremble. Sponsors pulled back. The network postponed the next season's production, calling it a strategic pause. Insiders whispered that executives were divided. Some wanted to protect Mona for her legacy, while others wanted a clean break before the brand was fully tarnished. Mona herself stayed quiet, though her team kept insisting the leaks were fake, the messages fabricated. Still, the screenshots spread faster than damage control could catch them. The story had already escaped the boundaries of her control. Meanwhile, Rasheeda kept building her own narrative, this time on her terms. She partnered with women's networks, held talks about empowerment, and launched an initiative supporting reality TV stars who'd faced public humiliation or manipulation. She spoke with grace, never naming names, but every listener knew who she meant. Her interviews were calm, reflective, and painfully honest. She said, "I used to think strength was surviving chaos. Now I know it's walking away from it." Fans quoted it like scripture. The same blogs that once mocked her now celebrated her as the face of integrity in a world addicted to spectacle. K. Michelle, for her part, began a slow transformation. After her private apology to Rasheeda, she too started distancing herself from the industry that had used her fire for ratings. She posted videos talking about forgiveness, peace, and artistic freedom. Her followers noticed a change: less gossip, more music, more songs. In one live session, she said, "The truth is, when you're the loud one, they make you the villain. But I was never angry, I was surviving." The comment hit deep, going viral across platforms. Suddenly, two women who had been pitted against each other for years became the symbols of healing and growth. But Mona wasn't ready to disappear quietly. Sources close to her claimed she was assembling a teledocumentary to set the record straight. They said she planned to reveal what really happened behind the scenes, painting herself as the misunderstood architect of reality television. Some saw it as desperation, others as strategy. Either way, it reignited public curiosity. Teaser clips began surfacing online. Mona sitting in a dark studio, saying lines like, "They all loved the fame until the consequences came. And every story has a villain, but maybe they chose the wrong one." The clips were cinematic, dramatic, perfectly edited. Yet, instead of clearing her name, they made her look even more manipulative. The backlash was swift. Fans commented that she was playing the same game again, reality for attention. Others demanded she apologize to Rasheeda publicly. Hashtags like #BoycottMona and #ProtectBlackWomen started trending. For the first time in her career, Mona faced public rejection, not from cast members but from viewers who once adored her brilliance. She issued a statement through her publicist saying she'd always uplifted Black women by giving them platforms to tell their stories. But few believed her now. Inside her inner circle, cracks began to form. Producers who had stood by her started leaving the company quietly. One even gave an interview under anonymity, claiming Mona was losing control. They described tense meetings, shouting matches, and canceled deals. "She's realizing," the producer said, "that power built on pain doesn't last forever." The statement spread like wildfire, marking the beginning of the end for Mona's public dominance. Then came the most unexpected twist. A video leaked from the network's archives, a never-before-seen recording from the reunion taping. It showed Mona during a break, speaking privately to another producer. She said, "If Rasheeda doesn't give us tears tonight, we'll use the Jasmine angle again. Pain sells. Always has." The clip was short, grainy, but unmistakable. Her voice was clear. Within hours, the footage went viral. Fans were outraged. Media outlets called it the final nail. Mona went silent on social media for days, an uncharacteristic move for a woman who once controlled every headline. Behind the scenes, legal teams got involved. The network distanced itself, saying they condemn any unethical production practices. Contracts were reevaluated. Former cast members considered suing for emotional distress. It became clear that what began as a fabricated storyline had spiraled into real-world consequences. And through it all, Rasheeda remained calm. She didn't gloat or celebrate. She simply posted one message on her Instagram story. The truth always finds the mic. It became an instant meme, a rallying cry for transparency and entertainment. As days turned into weeks, Mona's empire continued to crumble. Her upcoming documentary was shelved indefinitely. Sponsors withdrew funding. Her name, once synonymous with innovation, became a warning. But even in her downfall, she refused to show weakness. One insider said she told her staff, "Every queen gets dethroned eventually. But I built the castle, they'll still be walking on my floor." Yet, in the silence that followed, the world saw what she hadn't: a shift in the culture she created. The women she once molded into television characters had taken back their humanity. Rasheeda had turned her pain into purpose. Michelle had found her voice again. And fans had finally learned to question the stories they consumed. What had begun as a secret meeting to control a narrative had evolved into something poetic, a reckoning. And in the ruins of all that chaos, the truth finally stood unedited. And now, as the dust begins to settle and the truth stands bare for the world to see, one question remains: how deep does this betrayal really go? Mona Scott's empire may have cracked, but the shadows of her decisions stretch far beyond one scandal, one reunion, one show. The story of Rasheeda, Michelle, and the secret meeting that started it all, has become more than entertainment. It's a mirror. It forces every viewer, every fan, and every creator to ask where the line between truth and manipulation really lies. Because behind the lights, the cameras, and the perfectly edited storylines are real people with hearts, fears, and wounds that don't fade when the credits roll. The industry moves fast. Another season, another show, another scandal always waits around the corner. But something about this one feels different. Maybe it's because it showed us how even the strongest people can be rewritten by those holding the pen. Maybe it's because for the first time, the audience saw not the characters, but the cost. And maybe, just maybe, this moment will mark the beginning of a shift where authenticity becomes more powerful than spectacle, and peace becomes louder than drama. Rasheeda's silence became her weapon. Michelle's apology became her redemption. And Mona's downfall became a warning. Fans are still torn. Some say Mona will return stronger, that her genius can't be erased. Others believe her time has passed, that her legacy will forever be tied to the empire she lost control of. Either way, this story changed everything. It pulled back the curtain, showing that even in the glittering chaos of reality TV, no one is untouchable. So as you sit here, watching this unfold, think about what truth means in a world built on performance. Think about how easily loyalty can be bought, how quickly reputations can turn, and how the loudest moments are often scripted by the quietest people in the room. And then ask yourself, when the cameras turn off, who's really telling the story? If this saga has kept you hooked, if you've felt the tension, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the raw emotion behind it all, then this is your moment to speak. Drop your thoughts below. Whose side are you really on? Do you believe Rasheeda was betrayed? Or was it just business as usual in the empire of Mona Scott? Do you think Michelle was part of the plot? Or just another pawn in a bigger game? Let's see what the world thinks. Because your voice matters in this story just as much as theirs. And before you go, hit that like button if you believe the truth should never be edited for ratings. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next revelation. Because this world of fame, betrayal, and survival is far from over. Every week, there's another secret, another confession, another unexpected twist waiting to drop. And when it does, we'll be right here breaking it all down. Every look, every post, every word that makes the world stop and ask, what really happened? So go ahead, share this video, tell your friends, and keep the conversation alive. Because what started as a hidden meeting between Mona and Michelle has turned into a movement no producer can control. This is more than gossip now. It's a story about power, redemption, and the people who refuse to be silenced anymore. Until the next chapter unfolds, stay tuned, stay curious, and remember, every secret leaves a trail, every alliance has a cost, and every truth eventually finds the mic. If you're here for the real stories behind the headlines, for the emotion behind the performance, and for the voices that fight to be heard in a world full of noise, then this is your space. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the community that's rewriting the narrative one truth at a time. Because in the world of love and hip-hop, nothing stays buried forever. And as long as there are secrets to uncover, you already know we'll be here to spill every last drop of the tea.